Welcome to the next installment in my video lecture series in economics. And in this particular video lecture, we're going to be taking a look at how the elasticity of supply or demand can impact where the burden of a tax actually falls versus on consumers versus or producers. And in particular, we're going to be looking at some extreme scenarios whereby only the consumer or only the producer is bearing the full burden of the tax. And this completely depends upon what type of elasticity of supply and demand we are looking at. This is for my public finance course, and it relates to the tax incidence and competitive markets section of chapter 18. So here we have a market in equilibrium. We have our downward sloping demand curve here. And we're assuming that we have a perfectly elastic supply curve, i.e. a horizontal supply curve, and we have this market being in equilibrium. So if we place a tax upon the supply curve is going to shift upwards by the exact amount of the tax. So the vertical distance between the original price and the new price is going to be exactly equal to the tax. And we have a new equilibrium quantity of Q1, and the equilibrium price is just P0 plus the tax. So the suppliers have successfully shifted the entire burden on the consumers. Before they were paying P0, now they're paying P0 plus the tax. So therefore, the consumers bear the entire burden because now they're paying the entire tax, not a portion of it, 100% of it. So under this scenario where the supply curve is perfectly elastic, any tax placed on the supplier, the burden will fall completely on demanders. Let's take a different look at this where we have a demand curve that is inelastic, i.e. it is vertical at a particular quantity. So here we have an upward sloping supply curve, but we have a demand curve that is perfectly inelastic. It's vertical at the equilibrium quantity. So we have an equilibrium here at P0 and Q0. If we place a tax upon the supplier, again, the supply curve is going to shift upward vertically equal to the tax. We have a new equilibrium price, which is going to be equal to P0 plus the tax, and the equilibrium quantity remains unchanged. So again, consumers were paying P0 for this item before the tax. Now they're paying P0 plus the tax. So the entire tax has been shifted on the consumers. So even though the tax was placed upon the suppliers of this product, the burden of the tax falls upon the demanders, who now pay the tax the entire tax as a portion of their new price of the product. Now let's take a look at a different scenario where the supply curve is perfectly inelastic and is vertical, and we have a normal downward sloping demand curve. So under a normal situation, what the suppliers would do if they were going to be taxed would be to try to pass that tax and pass through to the consumers the tax. So they're going to want to charge P0 plus the tax. What will consumers say to this? Well, at that higher price, P0 plus the tax, they're only willing to buy Q1. Suppliers want to sell Q0. What's going to happen is there's going to be a surplus in the marketplace. So the only way the suppliers are going to be able to sell Q0 is to keep lowering the price until we get back to the original price, and that surplus will no longer exist. So if they attempt to pass that tax on to consumers, for example, charging P0 plus the tax, they will not be successful because there will be a surplus in the marketplace. The only way they can get rid of that surplus is to lower the price. They will keep lowering the price until we get back to the original equilibrium price of P0. So the suppliers will receive the price they will charge as P0, but they will only actually receive P0 minus the tax, because after they collect the money for the product, they have to reimburse the government for the tax. So they're actually going to be receiving less than the price because they have to remit the tax to the government. Another further example is if price is perfectly elastic, horizontal. So let's take a look at this situation where the supply curve is upward sloping. The supply curve is going to shift upward, equivalent amount to the tax. So we have a new equilibrium, which is the same price, P0, and the new equilibrium quantity is equal to Q1. So the suppliers cannot pass the tax on to individuals. They're only going to pay P0 for that particular price. So the entire burden falls upon the supplier. They're going to charge P0, but they're going to have to remit the tax itself, so they receive P0 less the tax as the actual quantity, the actual price that they're actually receiving, or the revenue that they're actually receiving.